Welcome to the Kairos Bridge. My name is Bethany Haney. Today we are talking about why toddlers say no to everything and why that's actually good news. This is part 6 in the series of Parenting Through the Stages of Development. I could probably guess what the most common word spoken in your house is right now if you have a toddler. Or when you did have a toddler, I could guess what it was then. It's no. No to breakfast, no to getting dressed, no to shoes, the wrong shoes or the right shoes, or just any shoes. No to leaving, no to staying, no to literally everything that you have suggested in the last 45 minutes. If it was your idea, the answer is no. And you're standing in your kitchen at 8 a.m. wondering, what happened to my sweet baby? And also, who is this tiny dictator and how do I negotiate with them? Now, if your child is past toddlerhood and you're watching this now with, say, a 9-year-old who gives up the moment that something gets hard, or a teenager who won't even try anymore, stay with me because where that pattern started is actually in toddlerhood. In that is where the will is formed or shamed. And so we're going to go back and unpack what was formed or shamed during their toddler years to know how to help them overcome it now. But here's what I need you to hear before anything else. Your toddler's no is not a behavior problem. It's a developmental milestone, one that is expected and one that is to be nurtured. It's actually the first evidence that your child has a will. And your job, one of the most important jobs of this entire stage, is to make sure that that will becomes a strength and not a source of shame. In the last episode, we talked about the first stage of development in infancy, the trust versus mistrust. The infant learned whether the world was safe, and if that stage was navigated well and with success, then the toddler arrives at stage 2 with a foundation of trust underneath them, meaning that they trust that someone is in their corner, on their side, that they are safe, they're seen, they can trust that they'll be soothed and supported. And now with that foundation, that gives them the ability to start doing something remarkable. They are ready to discover that they have a will. They are ready to go out and explore the world on their own. Now, what we have to do is provide the necessary guardrails for that, but we don't want to shut down their no or their will. So Erik Erikson, who came up with these stages of psychosocial development, called this stage of toddlerhood the autonomy versus shame and doubt. And it spans from about 12 to 18 months to 3 years of age. And the developmental task focus in this stage is exactly what it sounds like. Autonomy. That's what your child is practicing. They're testing the boundaries of their own will. Every no, every I do it myself, every dramatic protest over the color of the cup, the type of socks, what they wear, that's your child's brain and nervous system practicing the experience of being separate from you with their own preferences, their own desires, and a will of their own. When this stage resolves well, when the will is honored, bounded, and met with patience, the child develops a sense of what we call agency, a belief that their choices matter, that they are capable of navigating the world. And that foundation then becomes the foundation for motivation, resilience, and the willingness to try hard things later. All of that translates back to whether their autonomy was welcomed or shamed in these early years. That's why I say if you have a 9-year-old or a teenager who appears to be lacking motivation, resilience, or the desire to even try, it comes back to, did we shut down their will in toddlerhood? So let's talk about the tantrums of the toddler, because this is part of toddlerhood, and that's the part that really breaks most of us as parents. And I want to start by saying this clearly. Tantrums are not manipulation. They are not performances. They are not evidence of a spoiled child or a failing parent. A tantrum is an emotional flood. It is a toddler who is experiencing an emotion. Frustration, disappointment, overstimulation, perhaps it's hunger, driven by hunger or fatigue, often driven by a lack of feeling like they're having any fun or having any power or say so. And that is too large for their current regulatory capacity. Their nervous system doesn't have the ability to regulate that. Their brain is overwhelmed and does not have the ability to think through all of the necessary steps to get to a problem-solved solution. And so what comes out is what comes out. That's what they're wrestling with internally. And so toddlerhood is actually the first developmental window when emotions start to get named or shamed. And this matters enormously for everything that follows. Because when a toddler's emotional expression is consistently met with curiosity, like a parent says, I see you're really frustrated right now, that child begins to, first of all, develop an emotional vocabulary. But underneath that is the recognition like, oh, I don't actually have to behave this way. This person will stop and listen to what I'm going to say. And so that also starts to condition them to use their words because they know that they don't have to create these big outbursts to be able to get someone's attention. They know that they're seen. They know that it's safe to have a meltdown and that you're going to help calm them. When they learn then that those feelings have names like angry, hurt, sad, frustrated, disappointed, they then are learning that those things are survivable because when we name things, it helps diffuse the tension and the pressure behind them. But then they also learn that this person standing across from them, their parent or their caregiver, loves them so much that they're not afraid of their emotions, that they're going to stand there with them and help them figure these out. That's what creates the basis of emotional awareness, and it's the foundation of emotional regulation. A child cannot learn to regulate an emotion that they don't first have an awareness and an understanding of. However, when emotional expression is consistently met with either disapproving, dismissing, or laissez-faire, this creates significant challenges, not only in toddlerhood, but for the rest of their lives. So when we say things like, stop crying, you're fine, get over it, go to your room until you can calm down, the child learns something different. Not how to regulate emotions, because those are not emotional regulation strategies. What they learn is that they have to hide, that their feelings have to be tucked away. But the thing is that the feeling doesn't actually ever go away. It just goes underground with a countdown timer to explosion. And that's how it shows up later, either in aggression, rage, behavioral problems, or if it gets tucked down too deep, it shows up as emotional numbing, anxiety, depression, loneliness, and even suicidal ideation. This shutdown or this explosive behavior is an evidence of how their emotions have been handled all along. And oftentimes it starts to show up in the adolescent years when they are trying to come into their identity. So the child who was told that their emotions were too much then becomes the teenager whose emotions come out sideways. So what do you do about this then? First of all, if your child is already an adolescent, it's not too late. You can always go back and repair and rebuild these skills. And it looks similar to what you would do if you have a toddler now. You just change your tone and how you approach it and what the topics are. But the model is still the same. The framework is still the same. So let's say in the middle of a tantrum, what do? You co-regulate. Your toddler does not yet have the neurological capacity to regulate their own emotional state. Remember, they don't even have the words for it yet, much less the ability to understand it, so they can't regulate it. They have to watch you regulate an emotion before they learn how to regulate their own. They borrow that capacity from you. They are literally drawing from your calm nervous system to create their calm nervous system. It's why we say your calm is their calm. Your presence is their regulation. You are their external nervous system right now. And so the goal isn't to stop the tantrum. It's to be present through it so that we teach them, like, hard things are going to come in life. We don't circumvent or avoid them. They're going to come back up. Let me teach you how to work through it so that they learn, what does this feel like to pass through the storm, and that they can survive it and that they are still loved inside of it. That is what starts to build their capacity for confidence later in life, which we'll talk about in the middle and late childhood stages. So that's how to help navigate a tantrum. But we talked about the fact that this is the stage about autonomy, and autonomy support is one of the 3 core parenting principles that we talked about in part 1 and part 2. Remember, it was warmth, structure, and autonomy support. And so this is where it starts to show up for the first time. So, autonomy support in childhood is not about giving your child unlimited freedom. That is unsafe and does not provide them the scaffolding and the guardrails that they need. It's actually what we call bounded autonomy, offering very real and meaningful choices with structure that you have set in place. So you still have the parental authority. The choice is always contained, but choosing is always real. So we would say something like, do you want the red pajamas or the blue ones? It doesn't really matter whether they wear the red or the blue pajamas, but it helps them practice making choices. And at a young age, you always want to give limited choices because we don't want to overwhelm their brain beyond the capacity of making choices. We would not want to give them 5 choices for pajamas. That would be very overwhelming. Now, once they get to the ages of like 8, 9, or 10, we can say like, go to the closet and pick out your clothes. And then they've got like 8 things to choose from. But by that point, they have been given practice in making decisions ever since toddlerhood. You can also do it like, do you want to put your shoes on now or do you want to put them on after you finish your breakfast? Again, it doesn't give them the choice of whether to put shoes on or not. It lets them choose when to put the shoes on. And honestly, this is one of the secrets to diffusing power struggles is when you have given them a choice, their brain says, oh, I get to choose. I'm in control. And then you don't have to worry about the argument that's going to come about not putting shoes on because you've literally baked a choice into the mechanism. Instead of the choice of put your shoes on or don't put your shoes on, you've let them, instead of choosing not to put them on, choose when to put them on. Another example could be, do you want to hold my hand or do you want to hold on to the stroller? They've got to hold on to something. Let them choose which one it is. Every single one of these small choices is actually communicating something to your toddler's developing will. It says your preferences matter here. Your agency, it exists in this relationship and your voice is welcome. And when the answer is no, when there is no choice available because safety or necessity requires it, you can name that too. You can say, I know that you want to choose right now and I understand that, but this one is not a choice. But I still hear you. I will let you have the next choice possible. An example of that would be putting the seatbelt on the car. It's like, okay, this is not a choice. We don't get to choose whether we're going to wear a seatbelt or not, but I will let you know the next time that a choice comes up that you get to decide, such as, do they want the windows rolled down or not? Do they want to listen to music or not? Which music do they want to listen to? These, honestly, they seem like small moments, but they are not. They are significantly developmental. It is the daily formation of a child who will one day have to make choices on their own that actually matter. Choices about their value system, their beliefs, their relationships, their faith, their life. And that muscle of learning to make choices starts getting built here in toddlerhood, in the pajamas, in the snack, in the small, bounded, real decisions of a random Tuesday morning. Now, the shadow side of autonomy I mentioned at the beginning is shame or doubt. And shame in childhood, especially toddlerhood, doesn't always look like cruelty. Sometimes it looks like consistent overriding, meaning like we never let their will land anywhere. We hear what they say, but we don't ever actually let that choice be what gets followed through on. Sometimes it looks like mockery, where we'll roll our eyes at the tantrum and call them dramatic, or they'll have a meltdown and we just laugh and walk away. Sometimes it's impatience that communicates like, you are too much and I don't have time for this right now, or I have more important things to do. Sometimes we call them too slow, we call them too emotional, we call them too difficult. And so those are all little pieces of language that shame their choice. And a will that is consistently shamed does not get more compliant. It actually goes one of 2 directions. It either fights harder, and so then it becomes more oppositional, more explosive, or it goes quiet. It gives up, it stops initiating, and then now there's a child who won't try anything new or says, I can't, before they even have attempted it, or who gives up the moment that something gets hard. This is often the shame story that started in toddlerhood. So when the will was met with too much correction and not enough curiosity, that is what has produced this condition now, but we can always go back and repair it. I want to use a scripture passage here from Luke 15. It's a story that I think many of you have heard before, the story of the prodigal son. But I want you to see something in the father that I missed the first few times I read this story. The son comes to him and demands his inheritance, essentially saying, I wish you were dead. Give me what's mine. And the father gives it to him. He lets him go, even knowing it's the wrong decision. He doesn't override the will. He doesn't lecture him into better choices. He releases him, knowing what is coming. And that's one of the most costly acts of autonomy support in all of Scripture. But then the father watches, and the text tells us that while the son was still a long way off, the father saw him returning, which means that the father had been looking for him to come back. He had been watching the road. He wasn't chasing after him, controlling him, watching, waiting. He was present to the possibility of return without forcing it. And this is the posture of a parent who has released their control over a child's will and is holding space for them to find their way home. Now, obviously, the prodigal son was much older and had the ability to go out and live on his own. But what might that look like for your toddler? Maybe it's letting them wear the two left shoes that don't match, and then they realize how painful it is. Maybe it's letting them wear the jacket that's too small, or not wearing the jacket at all and being cold. And oftentimes, those decisions that they have backed themselves into are far greater teachers than our lectures ever could be. And so, where it is safe to allow them to make a choice, even a choice that we wouldn't agree with, it's often better to let them follow through on that poor choice as long as they maintain their safety. Because then what they learn from that is, okay, I need some help in making the right choice next time. And then they're much more open. And you can even be standing there like the father was and give choice. Would you like these shoes or these shoes? When the son returned, he had a speech prepared. He said, Father, I'm no longer worthy to be called your son. Make me as one of your hired servants. That is a script of shame. We see what happens when someone runs off and makes a choice that wasn't the best choice. And he had already rewritten a new identity for himself built entirely on his failure. And the father, what does he do? He runs towards him. He reinterprets the truth. He throws a robe around him before the speech is finished, a ring on his finger, sandals on his feet, and he does not let the shame narrative complete itself in his presence. That's what it looks like to interrupt someone's shame with belonging and say, you made a choice. You went out and you tried. I still love you. Let's figure out how to make this right. Before you address a child's behavior, here's how you can practice it this week. Start by naming the emotion underneath it. If they're having a tantrum, if they're having a meltdown, if they're being defiant and always saying no, name it. Say, I see you're really disappointed. I see that this is really frustrating. This feels really big right now. I know you wanted that. It's hard when the answer is no. Naming that does two things simultaneously. First of all, it activates the left side of the brain, the language center of the brain, which helps calm down the flooded right side of the emotional brain. And it communicates that their emotional experience is valid even when their behavior isn't. We don't have to validate the behavior, but if we validate the emotion, it calms their brain down and gets it into a space where they know that they are seen, they are safe, they are soothed, and they are supported. That's when we can move into the prefrontal cortex of, okay, problem-solving time, decision-making time, and consequence time. Now, consequences are a whole different topic that we'll talk about in a future series. But what it comes down to is like, you still have to leave the park. But do you want to go down the slide one more time? Or do you want to say goodbye? Or do you want to do 2 more rounds on the swings? You still have to eat dinner, but you can choose whether you eat it with a fork or a spoon. The structure holds in no matter what it looks like in your daily life. The will gets to land somewhere real. And then when the tantrum comes, and it will, just stay present. You don't have to fix it. You don't have to stop it. You don't have to abandon them inside of it. In fact, when you get low on their eye level, stay near, breathe, you will actually find that when you are empathetic with them in that place, you notice what's going on, you name what's going on, and you give space to nurture a better choice, most of these tantrums dissolve in less than 90 seconds. Then when they are calm enough, you can start naming it. That was really big, wasn't it? But you got through it, and I'm right here. The toddler who says no to everything right now, that is a will being formed. And that will is met with patience, bounded choices, and presence through the storms. That's what it should be met with, because when we do that, it becomes something remarkable. It becomes a teenager who can say no to peer pressure. It becomes an adult who knows what they believe and why they believe it. It becomes a person who has enough sense to stay true to themselves under the pressure. You will protect their will now, and it will become the strongest thing that they carry later on in life. So, next episode, we're going to move into early childhood between the ages of 3 and 6. And we're going to talk about children who try to initiate things, like when they try to do hard things, create things, put themselves out there. And it's also the stage where guilt and emotional overwhelm can shut all of that down before it ever gets started. So, that's what's coming next. If today gave you a new way to see your toddler, please share it with another parent who may need it. And if you want to work through what autonomy support and taming tantrums looks like in your specific home with your specific child in this specific season, I'm always available at thekairos.bridge.com. I would love to walk alongside you.